Buckle up, everybody, because today we are going deep into a case that will leave you speechless.
Oh, I know this one. It's a doozy.
We're talking about Maria Marta Garcia Belsuni.
From Argentina, right?
That's right. She was a prominent philanthropist, and her death back in 2002 sparked a chain reaction of twists and turns, legal battles, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah, this case is a textbook example of how those initial assumptions can just throw an investigation completely off course.
Absolutely. And it took over 20 years to really get to the bottom of it all.
I can't wait to unpack all of this.
We'll be using a true crime podcast as our source today. It goes into incredible detail, lays out the timeline, all the players, everything.
Sounds like a wild ride. Get ready for some wait wet moments, folks.
You got that right.
Oh!
All right, so picture this. It's 2002. Maria Marta is found dead in her bathroom.
Just like any normal day.
Exactly. And at first, it seems like a tragic accident.
Yeah.
Maybe she slipped and fell in the bathtub.
An open and shut case, right?
You would think. But Maria Marta's family, they were not convinced.
Really? What tipped them off?
Something about the whole scene just felt staged. It didn't sit right with them. So they started pushing for a more thorough investigation.
Smart move.
And thank goodness they did, because that's when things took a very sharp turn.
Okay, I'm intrigued. What happened?
They exhumed the body, and guess what they found?
I'm gonna go with something surprising.
You got it. Maria Marta hadn't died from a fall at all. She'd been shot 5 times.
In the head.
You know it.
Wow. Talk about a plot twist. This is no longer your average slip and fall.
That's an understatement. So now it's a full-blown murder investigation.
And I bet the family was feeling pretty vindicated at that point.
Absolutely. And now enter our lead investigator, Diego.
Uh-oh. I'm already getting a bad feeling about this.
He very quickly sets his sights on Maria Marta's husband, Carlos.
Oh boy, here we go. The husband is always the first suspect.
It happens a lot, right? But in this case, Diego's focus on Carlos ends up shaping years and years of legal battles, all sorts of complications.
I can see how that would happen.
So the prosecution, they start building their case against Carlos. They allege financial irregularities, suggest a possible motive involving money laundering.
Ooh, money laundering. Now we're getting into some shady business.
They basically try to paint Carlos as this guy caught up in all these illegal dealings, maybe even using his wife's charity work as a front.
So it was all about the money.
Seems like it. But here's the thing, and this is important. This whole money laundering angle, it was everywhere in the pre-trial documents, but then it just vanishes during the actual trial.
Really? That's bizarre. Like they just dropped it.
Exactly. And on top of that, there was never any solid evidence directly linking Carlos to the murder. No fingerprints, no DNA, no witnesses.
So it's all circumstantial.
Pretty much. But all the while, Maria Marta's family has their own theory brewing.
I'm guessing it doesn't involve Carlos?
Nope. They believe it was a burglary gone wrong. And they have a particular neighbor in mind, Nicholas Pachello.
Okay, Nicholas. What's his deal?
He had a bit of a reputation in the neighborhood, past accusations of theft, that kind of thing.
Oh, so a known troublemaker.
You could say that. And actually, the family even suspected him of stealing Maria Marta's dog.
Wait, what? He stole her dog.
Apparently so. Her beloved dog, Tom.
What?
Maria Marta was convinced Nicholas took him, even demanded a ransom, I think.
And did they ever get Tom back?
Sadly, no.
Oh.
They didn't pay the ransom, and Tom was never seen again.
Oh, that's awful. Poor Tom.
I know, it's heartbreaking. But anyway, this whole dog napping thing, it shows there was already some bad blood between Maria Marta and Nicholas.
Right, so there's a history of possible motive.
Exactly. Now, remember I mentioned the woman in pink at Maria Marta's wake? That mysterious figure nobody could identify.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Well, the family created a composite sketch based on witness descriptions. Guess who it looks a lot like?
Nicholas. Or someone connected to him.
Ding, 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 ding.
Nicholas's wife, he knows.
No way. So that puts Nicholas right there at the scene.
Right. You'd think that would be a huge red flag for investigator Diego, right?
Of course. It's practically gift-wrapped evidence. But get this. Diego completely dismisses it. Refuses to even include the sketch in his files.
Seriously, why would he do that?
He's laser-focused on Carlos. Anything that might suggest another suspect, he just ignores it.
Wow. Talk about tunnel vision.
This is a recurring theme in this case, unfortunately.
So what does the family do?
They're frustrated, obviously. So go to the media, hoping to bring attention to their theory, maybe put some pressure on Diego to open his eyes.
Makes sense. Any luck?
Not really. Diego's convinced that Carlos is the guilty party.
Stubborn. Much.
You could say that. Now remember, Nicholas claimed he had an alibi. Said he was miles away with his mother when Maria Marta died.
Right, right. But I have a feeling there's more to this.
Oh, there's always more. So the day before Diego is scheduled to interview Nicholas's mother, she takes her own life.
Oh my gosh, are you serious?
Jumps from her high-rise apartment, and get this, she leaves a note.
A suicide note. That's got to be important. What did it say?
She proclaims Nicholas's innocence and blames everything on Maria Marta's family.
Wow. That's a bombshell. A suicide note accusing the victim's family.
I know, right? And to make it even weirder, the note was addressed directly to Diego.
Like he was the intended audience.
Exactly. It's all very, very strange. You'd think this would make Diego reconsider Nicholas as a suspect, wouldn't you?
It's a pretty big sign pointing in that direction.
You would think. But nope. Diego sticks to his guns. Carlos is the guy. End of story.
Even with all these bizarre things happening around Nicholas.
Even with all of that, he was determined to pin the murder on Carlos no matter what.
Wow. I'm starting to see a pattern here.
And it doesn't end there.
Mm.
During Carlos's trial, Nicholas is called to testify, despite his lawyer trying everything to get him excused.
I bet that didn't go well for Nicholas.
Well, he sticks to his story, denies knowing Maria Marta, denies ever being in her house, insists he was with his mom.
But we know that's not true.
Exactly. And the prosecution, they present some pretty damning evidence. 3 kids from the neighborhood who knew Nicholas, even feared him, they testify that they saw him jogging near Maria Marta's house around the time she would have been biking home that day.
3 eyewitnesses. That's pretty hard to ignore.
You would think. But remember, we're dealing with Diego here.
Right, the tunnel vision king.
So let's recap. We've got a shaky alibi, a mysterious woman in pink, a possible dog napping, a mother's suspicious suicide with a note pointing fingers, and now eyewitness testimony putting Nicholas at the scene.
That's a lot of evidence pointing away from Carlos.
You'd think it would be enough, right?
And what about that money laundering motive? Did they ever prove that?
That's the crazy part. They never even brought it up during the trial.
What? Seriously? After all that?
It's like they knew it wouldn't hold up.
Yeah.
So the jury deliberates, and they come back with a verdict.
Okay, drum roll, please. What's the verdict?
Not guilty of murder.
What? Are you kidding me? After all that focus on Carlos, all that time and energy, they find him not guilty.
But there's a catch. They find him guilty of the cover-up.
Wait a minute, hold on. How can he be guilty of covering up a murder he didn't commit?
Exactly. It makes no sense. But the jury, they seem to want to give the prosecution something, even if it meant contradicting themselves.
So Carlos goes to prison for a cover-up that doesn't make sense, and the question of who actually killed Maria Marta is still up in the air.
You got it. The mystery continues.
Unbelievable. And what about Nicholas? Where does he fit into all of this?
We'll get to him, but first there's another twist coming up, and this one is a real doozy.
Oh boy, I can't wait.
Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Both sides appeal the verdict, and while all that's going on, Carlos is able to post bail. But 2 years later, the appeals court makes a decision that nobody saw coming.
Okay, spill it. What did they decide? Okay, I'm dying to know. What did the appeals court decide?
You ready for this? They upheld the cover-up conviction, but get this, they also convicted Carlos of murder.
Whoa, hold on. Are you saying they used the same evidence? The evidence the jury already saw?
The exact same evidence. It's practically unheard of for an appeals court in Argentina to just straight up convict someone like that.
So basically, one court says not guilty, and another court says guilty, all based on the same information.
Yeah, it really shows you how much wiggle room there is in the justice system.
Yeah.
How much depends on interpretation, you know?
Yeah, that's a bit unsettling. So what happens to Carlos?
He's sent to prison, convicted of a murder with flimsy evidence and a motive that was never even presented at trial. It's mind-boggling.
Oh.
But while he's in prison, something interesting happens.
Oh, what's that?
He starts hosting a radio show from prison.
A radio show? You're kidding. From prison?
No kidding. And this turned out to be a major turning point in the case.
How so?
The radio show gave Carlos a platform. He could share his side of the story, connect with the public.
Interesting. So he bypassed the legal system and went straight to the court of public opinion.
Exactly. And it worked. People started to sympathize with him, question the prosecution's case.
It makes you think about the power of storytelling, right?
Absolutely. But remember, all the other people who were caught up in the alleged cover-up, Maria Marta's family, the neighbor.
Oh, right. What happened to them?
They went on trial too. And most of them were convicted.
Yeah.
Sentences ranged from 3 to 5 years.
Wow, so it's like this whole group of people were trying to protect someone, but who and why?
It's a real tangled web.
Hmm.
But amidst all this, a glimmer of hope emerges. A journalist and a researcher start a blog dedicated to the case. They digitized the entire court file, made it accessible to the public.
That's awesome. Transparency is so important in these situations.
I know, right? And they proposed a new theory that really resonated with Maria Marta's family,
What was the theory?
a botched burglary.
Back to the family's original suspicion.
Yep. And it made a lot of sense in the context of what was happening in Argentina at the time. A lot of people kept large sums of cash at home because they didn't trust the banks.
Right, I remember hearing about that.
There were rumors that Carlos and Maria Marta had a lot of money stashed away. So the theory goes, these burglars planned to hit the house when it was empty. But Maria Marta came home early.
And things went sideways.
Exactly. It explains the lack of forced entry, maybe even the mysterious woman in pink as a lookout.
Yeah, the pieces start to fit together.
And this new theory gains traction. Public opinion continues to shift in Carlos's favor. But here's the thing. He's still stuck in legal limbo. Those convictions are still hanging over his head.
So what happens? How does he get out from under that?
Finally, in 2014, the Supreme Court steps in.
Ooh, the Supreme Court. That's a big deal.
Huge deal. They ordered the lower court to re-examine Carlos's conviction. But it wasn't just about freeing Carlos. The court also criticized the original investigation.
They basically said, hey, this whole thing was a mess.
Pretty much. They called for a serious, impartial investigation into Maria Marta's murder.
So Carlos is finally free. Does the focus shift back to Nicholas then?
It does. But there's a catch.
Another one. Seriously.
I know, right? This case is full of them. The catch is the statute of limitations. 15 years.
Oh no, the clock is ticking.
With less than a year to go, a new team of prosecutors takes over the case. And they don't waste any time. They subpoena both Nicholas Pachello and his ex-wife, Eanes.
Bold move. Go right to the source.
And smart, too. By questioning them, they effectively hit pause on the statute of limitations. It buys them time to build their case.
So what do they find?
Well, in March 2019, they announced their pressing charges. Not just against Nicholas, but also against two former security guards from the neighborhood.
Security guards. Now, this is getting interesting. What's their connection?
One of them was the very first person to arrive at the scene after Carlos got home that day.
That's suspicious. Like maybe there was some kind of inside job going on.
That's what the prosecutor's thinking. But here's the weird part. Even with all this suspicion, they can't find any DNA evidence linking Nicholas or the guards to the crime scene.
So, no smoking gun. What do they have?
Circumstantial evidence, but a lot of it.
Such.
Well, first, they confirm that Nicholas was definitely in the neighborhood when Maria Marta was murdered. They have records showing he came and went during the crucial time frame.
So much for his alibi.
Right. And remember how he sold his house right after Maria Marta died? Almost gave it away.
Yeah, it seemed like he was trying to disappear.
Well, they dig deeper and find out he was practically begging people to buy it, offering it way below market value. And he started doing this the very next day.
That's pretty damning.
The prosecution also uncovers Nicholas's involvement in another burglary in the neighborhood. A neighbor's golf clubs were stolen. And guess who sold them to a pawn shop?
Nicholas, I presume.
You got it. And he used his mother's last name instead of his own.
Trying to cover his tracks.
And it gets even better. During the trial, a friend of Nicholas's father testifies. He says that shortly after Maria Marta died, Nicholas asked him a very strange question.
Oh, what was it?
He asked what would happen if the weapon used to kill Maria Marta was never found.
Hold on. At that point, everyone still thought it was an accident. Why would he even bring up a weapon?
Exactly. It's
Yep.
like he knew something no one else did.
Oh, spooky.
Then, a retired police chief drops a bombshell. He testifies that he always believed Nicholas was responsible, but he was prevented from investigating him.
By who?
By Diego, the original lead investigator.
Wow. So it's not just tunnel vision, it's a possible cover-up within the police department.
And he's not the only one who says this. Another former police chief and the head of neighborhood security, they both say they considered Nicholas the main suspect.
But Diego shut it down.
Every time. Carlos and one of Maria Marta's sisters even filed a formal complaint, alleging that Diego shared confidential wiretap recordings with Nicholas's lawyer during Carlos's trial.
What? That's a huge breach of trust and totally illegal.
And these recordings were never disclosed to anyone else. It's a mess.
This Diego guy sounds shady as hell.
Yeah, the evidence against him starts to pile up. And the prosecution keeps bringing the heat. A car dealer testifies that Nicholas once threatened him. Said something like, If I had the guts to kill my own father, imagine what I could do to you.
Oh my God. That's chilling.
And remember that rumor about Nicholas killing his father? It was never confirmed, but it
Yeah.
adds to this picture of him as a dangerous, unpredictable guy.
Right, right. Capable of anything.
Then they find a connection to another Maria Marta Oro. In 2003, she was shot during a burglary in her apartment. The burglar demanded she open her safe. Sounds familiar, right?
Just like the lockbox that went missing from Maria Marta Garcia Belsuni's house.
It gets weirder. Nicholas eventually pleaded guilty to that burglary and shooting, even admitted to stalking Maria Marta Oro beforehand.
Okay, so we have a pattern of behavior here. Targeting women named Maria Marta, demanding access to their valuables.
With all this evidence against him, it seems like a slam dunk case, right?
You'd think so.
But here's the kicker. The judges initially acquitted Nicholas of Maria Marta's murder.
What? Are you serious? They acquitted him.
Can you believe it? Guilty of the other burglaries, but not the one that mattered most.
That's devastating. All those years of fighting, and it feels like they're right back where they started.
But they don't give up. The prosecutors appeal the acquittal. They're determined to get justice for Maria Marta.
And that's where we'll pick up next time.
You got it. Stay tuned. So the prosecution, they're not giving up.
Yeah.
They appeal that acquittal, and it's a long shot, but they're determined.
I mean, can you blame them after all that?
And you know what? Their persistence pays off. Just last week, the appeals court came back with a stunning verdict.
Oh, tell me they overturned the acquittal. Please tell me they finally got justice for Maria Marta.
They did. They found Nicholas Pachello guilty of Maria Marta's murder.
Yes, finally. After all these years, what was the sentence?
Life in prison. No more appeals, no more chances. Nicholas Pachello is going to spend the rest of his days behind bars.
That must be such a relief for Maria Marta's family. They never gave up.
It is. It's a bittersweet victory, of course.
Yeah.
Justice delayed is justice denied, but at least there's some sense of closure now. I mean, it's hard to believe it took 20 years. 20 years.
I know. It's incredible, isn't it? And to think if Diego hadn't been so fixated on Carlos, if he had just listened to the family, maybe things would have been different.
It really makes you think about how one person's bias can have such a huge impact.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just the investigators, right? We saw how public opinion played a role too. Carlos starts a radio show, tells his story, and suddenly people are on his side.
It's amazing how powerful a personal narrative can be.
Yeah, it really is. And I think this case is a good reminder that things aren't always what they seem. I mean, this started as a simple accident, and then boom, it explodes into this massive web of conspiracy and cover-ups.
It's like something out of a movie.
It is. And it just goes to show you, even the most ordinary events can have these hidden depths. What started as a suspected accident turns into this huge legal battle, a fight for justice that spans 2 decades. It's a story that reminds us that sometimes truth is stranger than fiction.
Well said. It's been a wild ride unpacking this case with you.
You and me both. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, stay curious, stay informed, and keep in mind, even in the most complex, twisted stories, there's always a truth waiting to be uncovered.